The guard found a peace offering from Harry at the palace gate, why he was ordered to destroy it. It was an ordinary day at the palace gates. The early morning sun had just started to rise, casting a soft glow across the royal grounds. The air was crisp, with the faintest hint of a breeze that carried the scent of freshly cut grass. The palace, with its grand architecture and towering walls, stood silently as usual, its beauty magnified in the quiet of dawn. The guards stood at their posts, as they did every day, watching over the entrances to the royal residence. Among them was a guard named Henry, a loyal and seasoned member of the palace security team. Henry had served in the royal palace for years, and he had seen many things during his time, diplomats coming and going, important guests visiting, and even the occasional protest at the gates. But today felt different. He couldn't quite put his finger on why, but there was an unusual energy in the air. Henry had been stationed at the gates for nearly an hour, doing his usual rounds. He had checked the perimeter, inspected the grounds, and made sure that everything was in order. As he stood near the entrance, his eyes caught something unusual. There, lying just a few feet in front of the gates, was a small package. It wasn't large or heavy, but it was neatly wrapped, and there was a card attached to it. The card simply had the name, Harry, written on it in bold, clear handwriting. Henry felt a sense of curiosity rise within him. He had seen packages delivered to the palace before, but they were usually addressed to the royal family or to staff members for special events. This package, however, was different. It wasn't addressed to anyone specific, and the name, Harry, on the card caught his attention. Was it from someone close to the family, or was it from Prince Harry himself? Henry had heard rumors of the prince's occasional gestures and public statements, but he didn't know what to make of this particular one. It seemed too quiet, too discreet, to be from anyone of real importance. Despite his curiosity, Henry knew he had a job to do. As the guard, it was his responsibility to ensure that nothing suspicious made its way into the palace. The security at the gates was tight, and nothing could pass through without being checked. But this wasn't just a simple delivery. It felt personal, almost like someone was trying to send a message. He knelt down and carefully picked up the package. It was surprisingly light, almost as if it contained nothing of great importance. But the neat wrapping and the simplicity of the gesture made Henry pause for a moment. What could it be? What could it mean? He turned the package over in his hands, inspecting it closely. There was no return address, no indication of who had sent it, and no signs of anything out of the ordinary. But the feeling in his gut told him that something wasn't quite right. He stood up slowly and glanced around. The palace grounds were still quiet. The other guards were doing their rounds, unaware of the package at the gate. Henry knew he needed to report the discovery. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him. It wasn't just about finding a package, it was about what that package could mean. He couldn't shake the feeling that something important was about to happen, or that this simple package was the beginning of something far bigger than he could imagine. As he walked back toward the security office, Henry couldn't help but wonder about the contents of the package. He had seen gifts and letters from time to time, but never something like this. The thought crossed his mind that it could be a gift for someone close to the royal family, or maybe even for the palace itself. But the mystery of the sender's identity kept gnawing at him. The card simply said Harry, and there was only one person he could think of who might be the sender, Prince Harry. But why would the prince send something like this, and why so secretly? Once he reached the office, Henry carefully placed the package on the desk, making sure not to disturb the wrapping. His supervisor, Sergeant Andrews, was already at his desk, sipping a cup of tea and reviewing some paperwork. Henry, trying to keep his voice steady, explained what he had found at the gates. Andrews listened carefully, not interrupting as Henry spoke. After a few moments of silence, the sergeant put his cup down and looked at the package. "Well, this is certainly odd," Andrews said, his tone more curious than concerned. "A peace offering, you say?" Henry nodded, still unsure of what to make of it. "Yes, sir. The card said it was a peace offering from someone named Harry. There's no other note, no return address." "Just the name?" Andrews scratched his chin thoughtfully. "It could be from anyone, but something about it doesn't sit right with me. Let's hold off on opening it until we can figure out what's going on." As they waited, Henry's mind continued to race. The name Harry had left him with more questions than answers. Was it really from Prince Harry? Could this be some kind of gesture from him, a public move to try and make peace with the royal family after everything that had happened in the past few years? Or was it someone else entirely, someone trying to send a message in the most subtle way possible? As the minutes ticked by, Henry couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the edge of something significant. Whatever was inside the package, it was more than just a gift. It was a message. The question was, who was it meant for and why? Meanwhile, the rest of the palace was carrying on as usual, completely unaware of the package that had appeared at the gate. The royal family was going about their daily routines, and the staff was preparing for the day's events. But for Henry, everything had shifted. He wasn't just a guard anymore. He was now part of a story that was unfolding in real time. Hours passed, and as the day began to turn into evening, a decision was made. Sergeant Andrews, after consulting with higher-ups, instructed Henry to bring the package to the royal office for further inspection. The higher-ups wanted to be sure that there was nothing dangerous about it, and they didn't want to take any chances. Henry carefully carried the package to the royal office, his mind still racing. What would they find inside? And who exactly was Harry? As Henry entered the royal office, he was met by the royal aides who were busy with various tasks. They paused when they saw him and the package, their curiosity piqued. No one had expected such an unusual delivery today, and the tension in the air was palpable. The moment had come, the package would be opened. But as Henry stood there, holding the simple package, he couldn't help but feel that this small, seemingly insignificant object might turn out to be far more important than anyone realized. The royal office was a busy place, filled with the hum of staff members working tirelessly to keep everything in order. As Henry entered the office, he was greeted by the usual hustle and bustle. The air smelled of polished wood and faint perfume, and the clink of tea cups and quiet murmurs filled the space. The royal aides, each busy with their tasks, didn't seem to notice Henry right away, but their curiosity was piqued as soon as they saw the package in his hands. Henry carefully placed the small, neatly wrapped package on the table in the middle of the office. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Everyone stopped for a moment, eyes turning toward the unexpected delivery. The royal aides exchanged glances, clearly wondering what this package could possibly contain. The silence was heavy, and for a moment it felt as though time had slowed down. Everyone could feel that something significant was about to unfold. One of the aides, a young woman named Clara, took a step forward. Her curiosity was clear on her face, but she remained calm and composed, a characteristic she had developed over years of working in the palace. She was the first to speak. "Do we know who this is from?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with curiosity. Henry shook his head. "It just says Harry on the card, no return address. It was left at the gates this morning." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Harry, you mean Prince Harry?" she asked, though there was a hint of uncertainty in her voice. Henry nodded slowly. "That's what I thought too, but it seems too quiet for him, don't you think?" Clara stepped closer to the package, her eyes narrowing slightly. "It's strange, a gift without a name or any context, and why leave it at the gates? It doesn't add up." The room fell into a contemplative silence as everyone considered the mystery of the package. Was it really from Prince Harry, or was someone else using his name? Henry felt a growing unease. He had always been cautious, but this felt different. There was something about the whole situation that didn't sit right with him. Why had this package been delivered in such an anonymous way, and why, of all places, had it been left at the gates? Another aide, a man named William, finally spoke up. "We should open it. Find out what's inside before it becomes a bigger issue." His voice was firm, as if he had already made up his mind. Henry agreed. "Yes, we'll need to make sure it's safe first." But even as he said the words, a part of him couldn't shake the feeling that they were already too deep into something they didn't fully understand. With the decision made, the aides began to gather around, and Henry carefully removed the wrapping from the package. As the paper unfolded, the contents were revealed, a small, handcrafted wooden box. It wasn't large, only about the size of a small book, but it was beautiful. The wood was dark and polished, and intricate patterns were carved into its surface. There was no visible brand or marking, just the finely crafted design. The box had a certain elegance to it, but it was also humble, as though someone had put a great deal of care into making it. The card that had been attached to the package fluttered to the table as Henry placed the box down. Clara leaned over and picked up the card. She glanced at the writing on the front before opening it. "It just says, A gesture of peace, and then, from Harry, that's it. Henry frowned. A gesture of peace, that's it. It was hard to believe that such a simple, almost vague message could come from someone like Prince Harry, especially after everything that had happened with him and the royal family. Maybe it's someone else using his name, William suggested. It could be a test or even a warning. We can't just assume this is harmless. Could it be a trap? Clara asked, her voice quiet. We know that sometimes people try to send messages in unusual ways. This could be one of those times. Henry's mind raced as he considered the possibilities. Was it really a peace offering, or was there something more to it? Could it be a message from Prince Harry himself, a way of extending an olive branch after everything that had happened in recent years? Or was this just another attempt to create chaos, a move designed to spark controversy? He looked at the wooden box again. It seemed so simple, almost innocent, but something about it felt heavy. He had been trained to trust his instincts, and right now, his instincts were telling him that they were dealing with something much bigger than just a box. Let's take it to the senior staff, Henry finally said, his voice steady but laced with concern. They'll want to see it and make a decision. The aides agreed, and together they carefully moved the wooden box to the senior office where the higher-ups in the royal family made their decisions. As Henry walked through the halls of the palace, the weight of the situation grew heavier. He couldn't help but wonder what would happen if the box was really from Prince Harry. Would it be seen as an attempt to mend the rift between him and the royal family, or would it only serve to make things worse? Once they reached the senior office, the room fell silent once again. The senior staff, including the head of security and a few high-ranking members of the royal household, were gathered around a large table. They looked at the package with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Everyone could feel that this was no ordinary delivery. Here it is, Henry said, setting the wooden box down in the center of the table. It was left at the gates this morning with a note saying it's a peace offering from Harry. The head of security, a tall, imposing man named Colonel Thompson, frowned as he examined the box. A peace offering? From Harry? That doesn't sound like him. I know, Henry replied, his voice uncertain. It seems too quiet, too simple, but the card. It only says Harry. No title, no last name. It could be from anyone. Colonel Thompson raised an eyebrow. We'll need to open it, of course, but first we need to consider the context. We're dealing with a delicate situation here. Anything from Prince Harry, whether genuine or not, could cause a stir. Agreed, another aide, Richard said. The last thing we want is for this to be a political move or a message that could divide the family further. Henry couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The more they discussed the situation, the more it seemed like this small, innocent-looking box was far more than it appeared. He glanced around at the senior staff, their faces serious and concerned. No one spoke for a moment, as if they were all waiting for the next move to become clear. Colonel Thompson nodded slowly. We'll open it, but carefully. If this truly is a peace offering, we need to be sure it's handled properly. As the senior staff prepared to open the box, Henry stood back, his thoughts swirling. Whatever was inside, it was clear that the implications of this delivery went far beyond just a simple gift. Prince Harry had been a controversial figure for years, and anything that came from him could set off a chain of events that no one could predict. The box was slowly opened, and as the lid lifted, everyone leaned in, their breath held in anticipation. What would they find inside? A simple gesture of goodwill or something more? As the lid of the box creaked open, the room was filled with a hushed silence. The senior staff members leaned forward, their eyes fixed on the box. Henry stood in the back, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never been so uncertain about something so seemingly simple. A gift, a peace offering, was supposed to bring people closer, but this one felt like it was carrying a heavy burden. The uncertainty about its origin only added to the growing sense of unease. The moment the box was fully opened, the contents were revealed. Inside, nestled carefully within soft velvet lining, was a small, intricately carved statue. It was a figure of a man and a woman, their hands clasped together in an almost intimate embrace. The craftsmanship was stunning. Every detail was meticulously carved, from the flowing robes of the figures to the serene expressions on their faces. The material was a dark, polished wood, almost black, with veins of lighter color running through it, creating a sense of depth and texture. The statue seemed beautiful, almost peaceful. But as the room took in the sight of it, an uncomfortable silence lingered. What was its significance? Why had it been chosen as a peace offering? The gesture, though elegant and delicate, seemed to hold a deeper meaning, one that no one could immediately grasp. Everyone in the room was trying to make sense of it, their minds racing with possible explanations. Henry, still standing at the back of the room, couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the statue than met the eye. It was too intricate, too carefully made to be just a simple gift. And the timing of it had come at a moment when the royal family was under intense scrutiny, with tensions between them and Prince Harry reaching a boiling point. Was this a true peace offering, or was it part of some larger plan? Clara, one of the royal aides, was the first to speak after the long silence. She stepped forward, her fingers lightly tracing the outline of the statue as she examined it. "It's beautiful," she said softly, almost to herself. "But it feels like it's saying something." Richard, another aide who had been standing at the table, nodded slowly. "Yes, it's not just a statue. There's intention behind it." He glanced up at the group, his expression thoughtful. "Could it be a message, a symbol of reconciliation, maybe? A way of telling us that it's time to move forward?" Henry's mind was spinning as he listened to the conversation unfold. He had been part of the royal security team for many years, and he had seen his share of gifts and diplomatic gestures, but nothing like this. This wasn't just an object. It felt like a silent statement, a conversation being had without words. Colonel Thompson, who had been quietly observing the statue, finally broke the silence. "We need to consider the possibility that this is a deliberate move. If this is from Prince Harry, it might be more than just a gesture. It could be a way to force us to respond, to make us acknowledge the tension that's been simmering beneath the surface." The room went quiet again as everyone absorbed the weight of his words. Henry could feel the tension rise as the implications of the situation started to sink in. The royal family had always prided itself on its image of unity and strength, but in recent years, there had been cracks in that image. Prince Harry's departure from royal duties had sent shockwaves through the palace, and the public had been watching closely for any signs of reconciliation or further division. This small, carved statue could be a signal that Harry wanted to reopen old wounds, or worse, to challenge the status quo. Clara, still staring at the statue, spoke up again. "But why leave it here in such an unexpected way? Why at the gates? Why not send it through official channels?" She shook her head. "This doesn't feel like the actions of someone trying to mend a relationship. It feels like someone trying to get attention, or to make a point." Henry's thoughts were in agreement with Clara's. The more he thought about it, the more it seemed like this wasn't just about making peace. It was about making a statement, an invitation to conversation, or maybe even a challenge. "It's clear that this wasn't just dropped off by chance," Richard added. "Someone knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't an ordinary gift." The more the group discussed it, the more Henry started to wonder whether they were all overthinking it. Maybe it was just a simple gesture, a way for Prince Harry, or whoever had sent it, to reach out and show a desire for reconciliation. But something deep down in Henry's gut told him that this small statue was far from ordinary. It wasn't just a gift, it was a message. Colonel Thompson, ever the strategist, finally broke the silence again. "Whatever this is, it's not just a gift. We can't ignore that it's arrived at a critical moment. The timing alone suggests that it's part of a larger plan, but we need to act carefully. If this is a message, we need to understand it fully before responding. We don't want to escalate things unnecessarily." The staff agreed, and the decision was made to consult with the royal family before making any public moves. But the question remained: what was this statue meant to symbolize? Was it a peace offering from Prince Harry? Or was it something more calculated, a move in a larger game that no one could fully understand? As the hours passed, Henry couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of something. The royal family was no stranger to drama, but this was different. The arrival of the statue at the palace gates was just the beginning. What followed would be far more complicated than anyone could have predicted. Henry had always prided himself on his ability to read a situation, to stay calm in the face of uncertainty. But this was different. There was a sense of foreboding in the air, and he couldn't ignore it. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that whatever this statue symbolized, it had the power to change everything. The palace, the royal family, and the monarchy itself might all be on the verge of a shift, one that none of them had seen coming. Late into the evening, word came down from the royal family. The statue was to be examined further by their advisors, and the senior staff was instructed to report back with their findings. The mystery of the statue was far from over, and Henry knew that whatever happened next, it would set the stage for something much bigger than anyone could anticipate. In the days that followed, the palace buzzed with anticipation. The higher-ups in the royal family had their own thoughts about the statue, but they were keeping their opinions close to their chests. Henry continued to serve at his post, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him more each day. The royal family was facing an uncertain future, and it seemed that this small wooden statue was just the beginning of a much larger story. The following days passed in a tense quiet. The royal family's advisors had reviewed the wooden statue, and though they had their theories, no one was willing to share their conclusions openly. Henry, still standing watch at the gates, could feel the shift in the air. The quiet buzz of palace life had become weighed down by uncertainty. Every staff member seemed to be walking a little more cautiously, speaking in hushed tones when they thought no one was listening. And yet, despite the tension, no one seemed to know what to do next. Each day felt like a slow unraveling of something far greater than a simple gift. The statue, once seen as a small, innocent offering, now seemed like a symbol of something deeper. And with the passing days, the staff's unease only grew. Henry couldn't help but feel that they were all caught in the middle of something much bigger than a mere reconciliation attempt from Prince Harry. The palace was being pulled in different directions, as everyone seemed to have their own interpretation of what this peace offering could mean. Colonel Thompson was the first to call a meeting. The senior staff gathered once again in the royal office. Henry had been invited to join, though he was still unsure about the significance of his presence in the larger conversation. He was, after all, just a guard, but something told him that his perspective mattered now. Everyone had been on edge, and now, with tensions rising and the palace full of whispers, they needed a clear path forward. As Henry entered the room, he was struck by the seriousness in the air. The usual hum of office chatter had been replaced by a sharp stillness, as though everyone was waiting for the next command. Colonel Thompson stood at the head of the room, his posture commanding and his eyes fixed on the table. The wooden statue rested at the center of the table, still as silent as it had been when it had first arrived. It almost seemed to hold a strange power now, its smooth surface glistening faintly in the soft light of the room, its intricate carvings reflecting the thoughts of everyone in the room. "We've consulted with the royal family," Colonel Thompson began, his voice steady but firm. "And after careful consideration, we've come to a conclusion. It's clear that this statue is not just a peace offering. It's a message. But from who and why, we still don't know. The timing of its arrival cannot be ignored. With everything that's been happening between Prince Harry and the royal family, we believe this gesture is meant to send a signal, one that we may not fully understand just yet." Henry stood still at the back of the room, trying to process the words. A signal. The thought lingered in his mind. Was this really a message from Prince Harry, or was it something far more complex? Henry had always been able to read a situation, but this one felt different. There was something about the way the staff spoke about the statue, something in their eyes that made it clear this wasn't just an ordinary gift. One of the senior aides, Richard, leaned forward, his eyes never leaving the statue. "What are we supposed to do now?" he asked. His voice was quiet, as though he was afraid that speaking too loudly might make the situation even more dangerous. "We're going to do what we always do," Colonel Thompson replied. "We proceed with caution, we keep our heads down, and we wait for more information. If this truly is a message, we need to be prepared for whatever comes next." Henry nodded, feeling the weight of the decision. There was something deeply unsettling about the idea of waiting. Every moment that passed felt like it was carrying them closer to something unknown. The palace, usually a place of order and tradition, now felt like a powder keg with the statue at the center of it all. As the meeting went on, the staff discussed their options, but the conversation was always guarded. No one wanted to make a wrong move. It was clear that they were all waiting for Prince Harry to make the next move, but it wasn't just about him anymore. The question wasn't just about whether he would come back to the palace. It was about whether the royal family was ready to handle what his return might mean. And more importantly, whether they were ready to respond to his message. In the days that followed, Henry noticed that people began to act differently. The staff, usually so attentive to their work, now seemed distracted, their minds elsewhere. They would glance nervously at the statue when they passed it, and the whispers grew louder. Even the visitors to the palace seemed uneasy, as if they could feel the growing tension that had settled over the royal grounds. One morning, as Henry was making his rounds at the gates, a messenger arrived with an urgent note. The royal family had decided that it was time for an official statement to be made. The note was brief, but it was clear. A public statement about the statue and its significance would be made soon. The palace was preparing for something, but no one was sure exactly what. The waiting had become unbearable, and it seemed like the palace was about to be thrust into the public eye once again. As Henry read the note, he couldn't help but feel a sense of dread settle in his chest. What if the royal family wasn't prepared for the fallout? What if the statue, this simple gesture, led to something much larger than anyone anticipated? He could feel the weight of the moment on his shoulders, and he knew that whatever happened next, the palace would never be the same. That evening, a formal announcement was made by the royal spokesperson. The statue was, in fact, from Prince Harry. The royal family had confirmed that the statue was a gesture of peace, a signal that Harry was willing to reconcile and attempt to mend the rift between him and the family. But the announcement came with a warning. The royal family was not yet ready to publicly accept or respond to the gesture. They would consider it in due time, but for now, they would remain silent. The news spread quickly, and soon, reporters and palace watchers were speculating about what this all meant. Was it truly a gesture of peace? Or was it just another tactic in a larger game of royal politics? The public, once again, was divided. Some believed that Harry's actions were sincere, while others thought it was just another attempt to get attention. The press had a field day with the story, and the palace, as always, was at the center of the storm. As the days went by, Henry continued his duties at the gates, but the unease never left him. The palace had been thrown into chaos, and the once peaceful grounds now felt like a battleground. The statue, once a small and seemingly insignificant offering, had become the symbol of a larger struggle. It had opened a door to questions that no one was prepared to answer. And as the royal family prepared for whatever came next, one thing was clear: this was only the beginning.